the top U.S. commander in Iraq. General, let's turn to the political situation in Baghdad. Back when you were being confirmed by the U.S. Senate, you said the point of the surge was not to win a military victory, but to give the Iraqi politicians time to reach out in national reconciliation. Let's take a look.
The objective will be to achieve sufficient security to provide the space and time for the Iraqi government to come to grips with the tough decisions its members must make to enable Iraq to move forward.
Now, that was 5 months ago, and since then, the Iraqi politicians have failed repeatedly to meet benchmarks for political reform. Hasn't that part of your surge strategy, trying to give the Iraqi politicians some breathing space, hasn't that failed, sir?
Well, there certainly have not been real substantial achievements in that regard so far. However, the oil framework law and also now the oil revenue law are pieces of legislation in which the Iraqi leaders are very much coming to grips right now. In fact, we helped bring down from the Iraqi Kurdish region last night the top negotiator, and we're at the stage where supposedly there are 2 sentences that must be resolved. So I think it's time to see now if these important laws can go forward, in addition to some of the other smaller achievements that they've had in terms of the higher electoral council, the budget, and so forth.
We understand that Secretary of Defense Gates basically gave the Iraqis a September deadline. He said we really have to see some measurable political reform by September. True?
Actually, not quite so blunt. In fact, Secretary Gates had a very good session with Prime Minister Maliki. In fact, he started off by complimenting the Prime Minister and the other leaders with whom he met on their response to the Samarra Mosque bombing. They were united in that effort. They were decisive, and we think their response in ordering rapid steps to be taken has in fact helped hold down the level of violence to well below what took place in the wake of the February 06 bombing. And in fact, I should note that yesterday there was an agreement with UNESCO and the government of Iraq to rebuild that Samarra Mosque.
I mean, I understand that, sir, but you know, we here back in the States look and we see the oil law has not been passed, the Constitution has not been amended, they have not held provincial elections, they have not brought Sunnis back into the government. I mean, the glass is not half full.
Chris, I don't think anybody is satisfied with where they are, and the Iraqi officials are foremost among them. They're grappling with really basic issues here. We're talking about issues that will set the course for this country for years and decades to come. Our own experience as a country, in fact, shows how difficult it is to resolve some of these very difficult issues. They recognize fully that our ability to help them in the future depends on the progress that they show over the course of the next few months. They're keenly aware of that, and I think they are going to do everything they can to try to inject hope into places like Washington and elsewhere to show that the Baghdad clock can indeed move a bit faster so that you can put a bit of time back on the Washington clock.
Well, let's start talking about the Washington clock. Less than a month ago, President Bush was talking up the importance of this progress report that you're going to be delivering to him and to Congress in September. Let's put it up on the screen. Mr. Bush said, "I see it as an important moment because David Petraeus says that's when he'll have a pretty good assessment as to what the effects of the surge has been." But now, sir, a number of top administration officials are downplaying the September report. Are you backing away from how much you're going to be able to say in September?
I am not. In fact, Ambassador Ryan Crocker, my diplomatic wingman here, and I will go back in September and we'll provide a snapshot of where we are at that time. And it will be a forthright assessment of what we've achieved and what we haven't achieved. I'll talk obviously about the security aspects of the situation, and he will address the political and economic ones. We also owe it, we think, to the decision makers at one end of Pennsylvania Avenue and those who provide advice and consent and resources for the policies at the other end, some sense of the implications of the various courses of action that might be under discussion at that point in time. There are some very serious centrifugal forces here in Iraq, and I think we all need to have very clear eyes about what can happen, what the implications of various options are, and again, just to assess those correctly.
Well, let's explore that. General Odierno, your number 2, said this weekend that the Washington politicians need to give the surge more time. Do you think by September you're going to have a reasonable and a realistic sense of how the surge has gone, whether in fact it is working or not working?
I think we will have a sense of that, Chris. I've said that all along. I started saying that back in January. I think we'll have had by then our forces in the mix for a good several months. We'll have some sense of how we have done in these various sanctuaries that al-Qaeda has had in the past that we are now entering for the first time, in which we will endeavor to stay. We'll have a sense of how we've done in some of these tough neighborhoods in Baghdad and how we are doing also, all of this in partnership with our Iraqi security force counterparts in Diyala province and in some of the other areas of this country.
So you think by then that the policymakers in Washington, the president, his administration, members of Congress can make a reasoned decision as to whether or not to continue with this strategy?
Well, what I've said, Chris, is that at that point in time, the ambassador and I think we can provide a reasonable snapshot of the situation at that time and how things have gone in the surge, both in the security and then the political and economic arenas. And it is obviously up to the policymakers and to the legislators to determine the course ahead.
Do you feel a sense of pressure? Do you feel that September deadline pressing in on you, and does it affect the decisions you make?
Chris, we've got a fairly heavy rucksack we're carrying out here, but thank goodness for all the tremendous troopers out here who in truth are really carrying the heavy burden of this. We've got a lot of great help in taking this forward, and we also have some wonderful partners on the Iraqi side. But we do see that time staring us squarely in our eyes, and we're focused on it, and we're going to try to do all that we can with what we have between now and then.